There are places on this earth where time does not flow, it coils, it echoes, it waits, high upon windswept plateaus, buried beneath jungles and sands, etched into mountainsides and carved within caverns. The ancients left messages, not in words, but in form, proportion, light, and alignment. These are not merely ruins, these are temples, keys, codices carved in stone, and those who built them did not build merely to shelter gods. They built to speak to the soul of time itself. We begin our journey in silence, for silence is the first gate of mystery. Imagine standing at the foot of an immense megalith, its stones impossible by modern standards, each one humming with a geometry too precise for accident. Here, amid the cold permanence of basalt and limestone, you are not a visitor, you are a witness to a sacred science. What the modern world has dismissed as decorative or coincidental, the ancients crafted with intent deeper than words can hold. They knew what we have forgotten, that architecture was a language, a mirror of the heavens, a cipher of the soul, and within this language was encoded the story of existence itself. The temples of Karnak, Angkor Wat, Teotihuacan, all aligned with stellar constellations, solstices, equinoxes, lunar phases, and the precessional rhythm of the cosmos. But this alignment is not merely astronomical, it is symbolic, for the stars were not just navigational tools to them, they were intelligences, divine emanations, archetypal forces reflected in the sacred design below, as above, so below. This was the first hermetic key. To walk the axis of a temple was to walk the path of the sun through the zodiac. To pass from one chamber to another was to descend into the underworld, to be tried, transformed, and reborn. The architects of the ancient world were not mere masons, they were initiates, guided by teachings now scattered across forgotten scrolls, broken tablets, and whispered oral traditions. From the stepped ziggurats of summer to the perfect golden ratios of the Parthenon, geometry was never mathematical alone, it was metaphysical, a tool to invoke order from chaos, to imprint harmony upon the earth, to draw the human spirit upward toward the divine. Every angle, every ratio, every sacred number -3, 7, 12, 33 was a code. Not arbitrary, not decorative, initiatory. Even now, fragments of these truths remain embedded in our cities, echoed in cathedrals, hidden in Masonic halls, frozen in Gothic spires. The knowledge never vanished, it simply retreated, waiting for eyes that could once again see. But to truly see, one must first awaken the inner vision. And for that, we must journey deeper, into a place where stone becomes symbol, where architecture becomes alchemy, and where the great temples are no longer mute, for they were built to speak. And they are still speaking. Let us now enter the second gate, where the secret language of shape and number begins to reveal the mind of the divine architect. The initiate steps forward, leaving behind the outer court, the world of appearances, and crosses into the inner sanctum, where silence deepens and light itself seems to bend in reverence. This is where geometry ceases to be a tool of measurement and becomes a revelation of eternal principles. For in sacred architecture, form is never separate from meaning. Every line is an invocation. Every proportion is a prayer. The ancients did not merely observe geometry. They lived it, breathed it, encoded it into temples and tombs, into labyrinths and obelisks. What we call design, they called the signature of the divine mind. The square, the triangle, the circle, these were not mere shapes. They were metaphysical glyphs, elemental archetypes, containers of spiritual power. The square, stable, grounded, symbolized the material world, the four directions, the four elements, the manifested realm. It was the base of the pyramid, the foundation of the city, the frame of the temple floor. But the square was never the end, only the beginning. The triangle, pointing upward, represented ascent, spirit rising from matter, fire, transformation, divine aspiration. It crowned the sacred pyramids, formed the gables of temples, echoed in the steeples of churches. In ancient Egypt, it was the form of the Benben stone, the primordial mound rising from the waters of Nun, the moment of creation. Frozen in geometry. The circle, infinite and centerless, was the womb of the cosmos, unity, eternity, the divine without beginning or end. Domes were not built merely for acoustic perfection. They were the celestial vault, the sky brought into form, in the Byzantine Hagia Sophia and the Islamic Dome of the Rock. The circle encloses the sacred center, the navel of the world, axis mundi, and yet it was the marriage of these forms, the interweaving of the earthly and the celestial, that birthed the true magic of sacred architecture. The Vesica Piscis, where two circles interlock, was revered as the womb of creation, the portal through which the one becomes two and the two give birth to the world. In Gothic cathedrals, this symbol was hidden in the very geometry of the floor plan, directing unseen energy like a cosmic lens. The golden ratio 1.618, a number found in the spirals of galaxies and seashells alike, was the divine fingerprint, the living breath of beauty that flowed through the columns of the Parthenon, the Great Pyramid, the Fouad of Chartres. The ancients did not discover it, they remembered it. In the Hermetic teachings, we find this echoed again. The all is mind. Geometry, then, was the blueprint of that mind. It was how the one thought itself into being. To walk through a temple constructed with sacred proportions was not merely to move through space, it was to move through the thoughts of the divine, to be reshaped by them, to remember, through resonance, the harmony from which all things arise. This is why initiates were led through temple corridors, in specific paths under measured light between columns of precisely spaced intervals. They were not merely observing symbols. They were passing through a spiritual machine, one designed to activate something within. And now, with this awakening, with these shapes and numbers alive once more in our inner vision, we must descend deeper still, for symbols are only gateways. To truly know, we must stand in the heart of the mystery, where the stone becomes language, and the temple begins to speak its sacred words. Beneath the echo of footfalls on ancient stone, something speaks, not in voice but in vibration, in the flicker of torchlight across a relief, in the angle of shadow cast at equinox, in the deliberate silence between columns. Here, the architecture does not merely stand, it utters, it sings. The temples of old were not constructed merely to house gods or impress kings. They were built to communicate. Every glyph, every relief, every chamber formed part of a greater text, one inscribed not on parchment, but in dimension, color, and spatial movement. They were books of stone, intended not for reading with the eyes, but for decoding with the soul. Consider the hieroglyph-covered halls of Abydos in Egypt. Here, amidst the carvings of gods and pharaohs, there lies a deeper code, not just mythic stories, but layered teachings on cosmology, spiritual anatomy, and the cycles of transmutation. The placement of symbols beside sacred geometry is no accident. The eye of Horus is not just a symbol of divine sight. It maps the pineal gland. The ankh is not merely life, it is resonance, the key of frequency and inner awakening. Light, too, was part of this language. At the temple of Abu Simbel, twice a year the rays of the rising sun penetrate the inner sanctuary, illuminating statues of the gods, but not the god of darkness. This is not spectacle. This is cosmic storytelling, an alignment of architecture with astronomical timing, revealing the union of solar intelligence with divine principle. The dance of time and eternity within the sacred walls. In Chavan D. Water, deep in the Andes, an ancient oracle center whispers in another dialect, sound. Stone channels direct the flow of water beneath the temple, creating a low, otherworldly rumble that disorients the senses, combined with hallucinogenic rites. Initiates were unmoored from consensus reality. made receptive to the encoded teachings. Carved in the temple's mysterious figures, jaguar men, serpents, and composite deities of transformation. Each sculpture was a portal, a lesson, a warning. Symbols in sacred architecture are not illustrations, they are engines of meaning. They function alchemically, not aesthetically. The spiral, the serpent, the labyrinth, these are not metaphors, they are processes. To see a spiral carved on a lintel is to be reminded that the path inward is not linear, it loops, it descends before it ascends, it transforms. The cathedrals of Europe carry this tradition forward in Christian form. Gargoyles, misunderstood as grotesques, were placed as guardians, not just of the building, but of spiritual passage. They represented the outer chaos, the unrefined, which the initiate must face and integrate. The rose windows, with their 12-fold symmetry and floral motifs, are not mere decoration, they are mandalas, maps of the cosmos, stained glass revelations framed in stone. These languages were not taught in schools. They were transmitted through mystery schools, orders that required silence and vows. Through these currents, the builders, often initiated in hermetic and alchemical traditions, encoded the ineffable within mortar and marble. The temple, then, was not only a reflection of the divine cosmos, it was a living structure designed to change the consciousness of those who entered. And yet, even the most potent language becomes silent to those who have forgotten how to listen. To hear once more, we must cross a threshold beyond even form and symbol. We must descend into the chambers beneath the temple where ancient blueprints, sacred relics, and hidden chambers hold truths long denied, sealed by secret orders, waiting for the worthy. The outer temples dazzle, their symbols speak, their alignments echo the heavens, but it is in their depths, in the sealed vaults, the sunless corridors, and the forbidden chambers, that the most sacred knowledge sleeps. Every great temple has its underworld, and it is here, in the darkness beneath the altar, that the initiate confronts the mystery unfiltered. From Giza to Delphi, from Angkor to the Templum Passus of Rome, the ancients constructed their sacred places not merely above the earth, but within it. Subterranean corridors, hidden vaults, and echoing passageways spiral downward like a mirrored descent into the unconscious mind. Here, stone ceases to guide the masses and begins to instruct the few. What lies beneath is not just architecture. It is instructional space, ritual chambers designed not for the eye, but for the inner vision. The tomb of the serpent beneath Chichen Itza, the cryptic Syrian of Abydos, the hypogeum of Wal Saflieni in Malta, all these subterranean sanctums bear the mark of initiatory design. Their acoustics resonate with certain frequencies. Their architecture mimics the womb, the tomb, the chrysalis. The initiate enters not to observe, but to undergo. Within these depths are blueprints, not merely for temples, but for transformation. Ancient manuscripts hidden in niches, inscribed on obsidian, etched into gold, or burned to ash. Fragments speak of maps of the inner body aligned with star systems, of musical scales that open psychic gates, of codes embedded into architecture that respond to vibration and intention. And here we encounter the forbidden, for these chambers often hold knowledge suppressed, hidden not by time, but by design. Secret societies, from the mystery schools of Egypt to the Pythagoreans, Essenes, Mithrists, Templars, and Rosicrucians, were not born from superstition. They were guardians of a legacy too potent to be left in open hands. These initiates inherited not just rituals, but entire cosmological architectures. They knew that certain forms, when constructed in harmony with celestial law, could alter consciousness, manipulate subtle forces, even bend reality. In the labyrinth, beneath Solomon's temple, long buried and denied, texts once spoke of the shamir, a stone or force that could cut other stone without touch. In the dark hollows beneath the Vatican, vaults brim with scrolls never seen, detailing pre-Christian rites of architectural theurgy and star-born alignments. Beneath the Vatican Library itself are floor plans, some say of temples not of this earth, and yet the mystery deepens, for beneath the physical structures lie even deeper chambers. Those not of stone, but of dream, of mythic memory. Architecture reflects the psyche, and beneath every sacred building lies a symbolic underworld, an archetypal descent into shadow, chaos, rebirth. This is why the initiate must ascend before they ascend. In the Eleusinian rites, initiates were blindfolded and led underground to symbolically die and be reborn in light. In the Egyptian book of Coming Forth by Day, the soul journeys through the 12 hours of night, meeting symbols not just of judgment, but of alchemical evolution. The hidden chambers are not merely places, they are processes. They are the forge, in which the raw human is refined into the divine vessel. And once this descent is complete, once the dark has been seen not as enemy but as teacher, the initiate emerges transformed. Now the sacred temple is no longer just a structure, it is a mirror, and to read its symbols is to read oneself. But the journey is not yet finished, for now we must rise, not to the outer temple, but to the celestial blueprint above, where the stars themselves shape the floor plans below, and the entire earth becomes a sanctuary of encoded light. Above the highest spires, beyond the vaulted domes and soaring arches, a greater architecture extends, silent, luminous, unchanging. The ancients did not look to the stars as distant ornaments. They saw in them the original blueprint. The heavens were not above, they were within. They were not gazed upon, they were mirrored. And so it is that the greatest temples were not first conceived by human hands, but by celestial archetypes. Builders were but transcribers of what was already written in the sky. In the sprawling ruins of Teotihuacan, the pyramids align not just with the cardinal directions, but with the Pleiades, the same star cluster revered across continents. From the Dogon of Mali to the Maori of New Zealand. Why? Because the ancients believed that knowledge, real transformative knowledge, came from the stars, not metaphorically, literally. The temple then became a landing site for light, a resonance chamber for cosmic frequency. This is no poetic fancy. At Nabta Playa in the Nubian desert, stone circles align with Sirius, the star of Isis, of rebirth, of ancestral return. In the Angkor complex, the pattern of the temples mimics the constellation Draco, the celestial serpent, guardian of the pole, keeper of hidden power. At Giza, the pyramids correspond to Orion's belt, Osiris in the sky embodied in stone. These alignments are not decorative, they are functional. For the ancients held that certain stellar positions opened windows, portals through which divine intelligence flowed. To build a temple in harmony with these celestial moments was to anchor that energy, to call down the heavens into matter. But it was not merely about location, it was timing. The ancients marked the heavens with astonishing precision, tracking equinoxes, solstices, lunar standstills, Venus cycles, and precession over thousands of years. Why? Because time itself, to them, was sacred architecture. And sacred architecture had to move with cosmic rhythm. This is why the Mayan pyramids are calendars. Why the zodiacs of Dendera depict not just astrology, but initiation cycles. Why Gothic cathedrals feature astrological motifs not out of medieval superstition, but hermetic necessity. They are not tracking fate, they are tuning to cosmic order. The hermetic dictum, that which is above is as that which is below, is nowhere more literal. The sacred architect was not a builder. He was an astrologer, a mystic, a mathematician of the soul. His compass was the orbit of Venus. His square was the tilt of the earth. His ink was starlight. In the Platonic tradition, the cosmos was constructed through geometric forms, the dodecahedron, cube and sphere, divine solids reflecting the mind of the Creator. Thus, to build on earth according to the sky was not idolatry, It was participation in divine creation. The initiate walking these celestial temples did not simply observe, he resonated. The path through the temple was aligned with the sun's journey through the zodiac. The inner sanctum corresponded to the pole star, the still center. By moving through the temple, he was moving through the story of the cosmos, and also through his own inner heavens. For the temple is a mnemonic, a memory palace that encodes not only earth and star, but soul. To understand it is to remember not just history, but origin, cosmic origin. And yet, this was only the outermost expression. For beneath the stars, beneath the temple stones, beneath even the symbolic codes lies a final mystery, a power not drawn, not built, but awakened, the fire hidden within the initiate himself. And for that, we must walk into the heart of the temple, where fire and form unite, and the soul becomes the sacred flame. Stone may rise, symbols may whisper, stars may align, but all of it, all architecture, all geometry, all cosmic symmetry exists for one single purpose, to ignite the inner flame. The ancients knew this, and they built their temples not only as maps of the heavens, not only as vessels of divine proportion, but as alchemical crucibles, sacred machines designed to activate a hidden process within the initiate. The journey through the temple was the journey of the soul, and at its center burned the fire not of the sun but of transfiguration. You enter the sanctuary not as a pilgrim, but as a raw element. And as you move, chamber by chamber, symbol by symbol, proportion by proportion, something begins to stir. The vibration of sacred number, the sacred geometry of the space, the harmonics of the light, all of it works in concert to awaken what lies dormant within. At Eleusis. The mystery rites were never spoken aloud. What the initiate saw in the inner sanctum was forbidden to recount, but ancient accounts hint at a vision of cosmic birth, a luminous emergence, an overwhelming realization that the universe and the self are not separate, that the temple is within. In the Great Pyramid, not a tomb, but an initiatory chamber. The king's chamber hums at 432 Hz, a frequency resonating with planetary cycles and heart coherence. The narrow shafts aligned to stars were not airways, but celestial resonators. The initiate would lie within the sarcophagus in darkness, in silence, the body stilled, until the soul was awakened by the architecture itself. The fire this awakens is the same fire that Prometheus stole, the same light that Lucifer bore, the same flame guarded by Vesta and carried by the hermetic initiate through the labyrinth of transmutation. It is the flame of gnosis, not belief, but direct experience. It does not come from dogma or creed, it comes from resonance. When the outer temple aligns perfectly with the inner temple, a spark leaps between worlds. This is the true secret behind sacred architecture. It is not made of stone, it is made of intention. The layout, the materials, the orientation, all are conductors for unseen forces. And when constructed with right knowledge, the temple becomes a living being, a guardian, a guide, a gate, and that gate leads inward. For every journey through sacred architecture is a mirror of the path within, from the profane world to the holy of holies, from the fragmented ego to the unified self, from forgetfulness to remembrance. The temple's form encodes this path, not metaphorically, but functionally. The columns represent the spine, the domes, the skull, the sanctum, the pineal. The light passing through clerestory windows mirrors the descent of higher awareness. The crypt, the root of being, the confrontation with shadow, the altar, the heart. Every sacred space is a body, and every body is a potential temple. This is why, in the most guarded teachings of the mystery schools, it was said, "Know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods and the universe," not because the self is divine by decree, but because the temple is within, and the initiate becomes its architect. To walk the path of sacred architecture is to remember that the temples were not built merely to honor the gods. They were built to become one, not as act of worship, but as a rite of awakening, a metamorphosis encoded in mortar and flame. And now, having stood in the sanctuary, seen the fire, and heard the stone speak, we prepare to pass beyond the veil, not into the past, nor into the heavens, but into the symbolic eye, the archetypal realm, where myth, memory, and symbol converge in eternal recurrence. When the fire within is lit, when the seeker stands in the stillness of the sanctum, and the temple's voice becomes inner speech, a final gate appears, not built of stone or starlight, but of symbol. The eye opens not upward, but inward, and what it sees is not the past, but the eternal dot. At this depth, sacred architecture no longer appears as structure, but as mythic memory made form. Every column becomes an axis mundi, every vault a sky, every corridor a journey through the archetypal self. The initiate does not see the temple, the initiate becomes it. Across all civilizations, all continents, this eye has gazed through different myths, yet the same truth. The temples of the Aztecs, the sanctuaries of the Greeks, the pagodas of the East, the ziggurats of the Sumerians, all house the same symbolic language, spoken through different alphabets, but birthed from the same origin, the archetypal realm, that eternal ocean from which all myths arise. In this realm, the serpent coils at the foundation, not as demon, but as force, as energy, as the primal current of life. It slithers up the staff of Hermes, wins through the chakras of the yogi, guards the gates of temples the world over. The twin pillars, Jachin and Boaz, rise as dualities, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, structure and flow. The labyrinth, coiled like a spiral in temple floors, guides the seeker not to escape, but to return inward deeper until the center is reached. This language is not invented, it is inherited, written into the collective psyche, engraved, not just in stone, but in dream. Carl Jung called them archetypes, patterns older than history, living ideas that shape cultures and stories across millennia. In this view, sacred architecture is not merely inspired, it is the architecture of the unconscious made visible. Thus, when you stand beneath a Gothic vault and feel awe, it is not merely the height or beauty that moves you, it is recognition. You are remembering a form older than time, a gesture of the cosmos toward itself. Even the layout of sacred space reflects the archetypal journey. The hero enters the temple as the fool, and tested, uncertain. Along the way he faces trials, guardians, thresholds. The altar is not just a place of worship, it is the point of sacrifice. The ego offered, the illusion shed, the self revealed. The light pouring from above at the climax of this journey is not sunlight, it is symbolic illumination. The myths carved into tympanums, painted on frescoes, or hidden in floor mosaics are not decorations. They are initiation stories. To read them is to walk them. To understand them is to enact them. The tale of Isis reassembling Osiris, of Dionysus torn and reborn, of Christ crucified and risen. These are not merely beliefs. They are architectural functions, encoding the cycle of death and resurrection that each soul must undergo. In the Eleusinian mysteries, the final vision was called apoptia, the great seeing, not with the eyes of flesh, but the eye of spirit, the eye that looks through symbol and beholds the timeless structure behind reality. And so the sacred temple becomes a mirror of myth, and myth becomes the echo of the temple. The seeker stands within the great design and sees not just gods and stars, but himself, refracted through the prism of symbol, initiated through the dance of shadow and light. But the journey has one more step, for what is seen must be integrated, what is remembered must be lived. And so we turn now to the final gate, the return, the sacred act of carrying the temple within and seeing its echo in the world anew. The path winds full circle. The seeker, having passed through stone and symbol, star and silence, does not return the same. The outer temple now stands as it always has, weathered, solemn, silent, but something has shifted. It is no longer the temple that speaks. It is you who hears. The journey through sacred architecture is not about buildings. It is about awakening memory, deep memory, soul memory of a truth older than language, that the universe is structured, not chaotically, but sacredly, and that this structure lives within you. Every pillar you passed represented a principle within you. Every shadowed corridor reflected your forgotten doubts. Every upward vault mirrored your potential for ascent. And now, as you step once more into the world of names and noise, you carry the blueprint of the temple within your own being. The ancients knew this. That is why their temples face the rising sun, so that the initiate would walk in light step into awakening. It was never about stone alone. It was always about the transmission of state. The temple was a vessel of consciousness, and the true miracle was not what was built, but what was activated in those who entered. In the teachings of Hermeticism, the body is called the microcosm. The soul is the altar, the spine the staff, the mind the sanctum, the inner light that flickers during meditation, during awe, during the silence of sacred moments. That is the flame of the hidden temple. It does not burn in Jerusalem or Delphi alone. It burns in every place where silence is held sacred, where proportion aligns, where beauty is born not from taste, but from truth. It burns in your breath, in your stillness, in your seeking. The final secret, hidden in every sacred text, every encrypted glyph, every concealed chamber, is this: you are the temple. You are the altar, the initiate, the mystery, and the solution. And so now, as the veil closes once more, as the ancient stone falls silent, as the stars take their places in the sky, the true question arises: not what did they build, but what will you build now, carrying the memory of divine design within you? Will you walk the earth as temple? Will you speak the language of symbol, of silence, of structure and soul? For the temple is not gone. It has only shifted from the desert sands and mountain peaks into the realm of the unseen, awaiting those who remember, those who carry the geometry of truth in their hearts. The final revelation is not in discovering sacred architecture, it is in becoming it.